Hey, David here, and welcome to my channel. So today is episode 5 of my series, How I Made a Movie, the movie Walk in the Park. And this is post-production, or some people might say editing, but there's a lot more to post-production than editing. And we're gonna dive into some of that and how I made Walk in the Park. So what exactly is post-production? Well, post-production is after production, wow, right? And it's about creating or putting together all the elements necessary to finish your product, if you will, right? There's editing of the footage, obviously. There's editing of audio. For most people, the editing of audio and the video or visuals go together. But back in the day when I shot film and stuff like that, sometimes, it's completely separate. Actually, it was completely separate because you had the visuals and then the audio was separate, and then you had to link them together, obviously in post. But we're not going to be getting into any of that for this video because I'm going to be talking about just how I made Walk in the Park. So if you've watched the rest of the series or where we've come to this point so far, I shot it on a red Komodo. I shot it, all the audio for the most part, except for a couple scenes, which I mentioned in the production episode, was straight into my Komodo. So editing the audio and visuals, they were synced together already. I did it all inside of DaVinci Resolve. And also I should let you guys know, this video in this series is not really a nuts and bolts how to click things with your mouse, whatever, this software, that sort of. No, I just wanted to kind of tell you how I did what I did, and I don't get into the, like I said, the nuts and bolts of the software packages that I use and stuff like that. So the quick shop talk, shooting on my ZR right now, shooting NRAW. I've got the 40 millimeter TT Artisan lens. I'm shooting it, I think, at f2.8, something like that. So that's what we're shooting this on right now. So let's just go real quick and do a rundown of what I used in post-production, some of the tools I used. I edited all of it, everything in DaVinci Resolve. Like I said, it was 6K Red Raw from the Red Komodo. I have a lot of audio plugins or audio tools, if you will, and some of them are, I'll list off everything right now and then I'll dive into it a little deeper. I have iZotope. They're pretty much their full suite. Used iZotope RX for the stuff that I needed, I'll talk about an example over here, some of the more intricate stuff. But I also have the Dialog Isolate, which is a plugin that I can use inside of DaVinci Resolve. I also have other plugins, like there's Nectar 4. And at the time, when I did this movie, it might have been Nectar 3. We're up to Nectar 4 now, I believe it's called, which is kind of a sweetener, if you will. And then also I use Ozone. It was probably 10 at the time I did the movie. I have Ozone 11 now. So I use those for the sweetening and whatnot. And now for the music, I have a software package called Digital Performer, but I also have a lot of plugins that I used with it from a company called Toontrack. And Toontracks, I loosely say plugins. They might call them packs or something like that. And they're basically MIDI packs where you can go in and get different styles and stuff like that. And then you can tweak them if you want to. And you have to have, of course, some musical knowledge, chord structure. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it, like I said, but I did all of the music for a Walk in the Park. And a good part of it, I used those Toontrack MIDI packs to kind of get me started, and something along those lines. I also have a software package called Spectral Layers. I always get it wrong, but it's the ability to really go in and pull stuff out, if you will. Like if you've got some ambulance noise or something like that, you can go in and pull that out. But for the most part, I use, like I said, I use DaVinci Resolve for all the editing, and of course the color grading, I did DaVinci Resolve. I use Digital Performer. I currently own Cubase, but I also have Digital Performer. But for Walk in the Park, I use Digital Performer. And Digital Performer has some perks. Like I said, I'm not going to get into a lot of it, but Digital Performer, it's a good program for doing soundtrack type stuff with movies. And so, like I said, then also I have the iZotope stuff, and that's pretty much it. If I think of something else, I'll bring it up, but I think that's pretty much it. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about AI later and how I plan on doing the next projects and things like that. So let's get into more of the details of the editing. Okay, so where I'm at right now is actually one of the locations that I shot Walk in the Park. And I had some scenes you can see right behind me here. That was one of the not opening, but early on, an aerial shot of the guy there talking to his buddy. And then I also have another scene over here that I'm going to talk about from an editing perspective. Over here it was the young man with his mom, And so anyway, that's where I'm at right now. So, let's talk about what I did with that particular scene and the unique editing components, if you will. I wanted to do something a little bit different. So in this particular scene, and it's kind of funny because when you talk about post-production, you have to talk about production a little bit because they go together, right? And when you're doing a movie yourself, when you're in production, you better have a pretty good idea of what your post-production looks like or what your capabilities are and things like that, because you got to know what you can do, right? So when I shot this, I shot the scenes with the guy over here in the bleachers, and he also is down by the goalpost down there, which I'll show you. I shot his first, and then I brought the young man and his wife over, my wife, young man and his mother over here and shot their scene. And before I shot their scene, I actually did the aerial shot, which I'll show you. I did this aerial shot going from them to him, and I shot that obviously before I shot their scenes because I wanted him to be able to leave, right? So we're talking about, once again, production scheduling and stuff like that. And so from an editing perspective, of course, I had my Inspire 2 drone, which was shot on RAW, and then I have my Red RAW stuff. And then what I did over here, what was unique about this one is originally he's talking to a young girl, okay? And the original script was he was with his mom and she was with her mom. And it ended up that the person that I got for that role, it ended up being her dad that was walking with him. It ended up being a guy, and it actually was her dad. And so what happened was this, and this is the beauty of technology now with what you can do with audio. And I believe I made these changes in iZotope RX. I don't believe I did it in Spectral Layers. I'm pretty sure I did it with iZotope RX. And so anyway, he's over there, and one of the lines is, I'm out with my mom or something like that, okay? And so I think he asked her, and she goes, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm at the park with my dad." And he said, "I'm at the track with my mom." And so, no, no, I apologize. The original script was, I'm at the park with my mom. That was the original script. And so when I had him say his line, because I shot his before I did hers, you guys with me here? I shot his before hers. So his line, the way I had him say it was, I'm at the track with my mom, or I'm at the track with my mom. So it sounded like he was responding to her being with her mom. And so it didn't fit at all. And so what I had to do is I had to change it so that his dialogue says, I'm at the track or whatever it is with my mom. So it sounded like he was saying I'm with my mom instead of with my dad. Makes sense, right? So I had to change that, and that was done in post. And I'm going to show you what it sounded like right now.
Hello?
Hey girl, what's up?
Nothing much, just walking in the park with my dad. How about you?
I'm at the football field with my mom.
You're probably sitting on your behind.
So that's an example of the way technology is nowadays. It's really kind of amazing that you can actually go in and change inflections and all kinds of stuff, which don't get me started on AI, but this has been around for a while. The ability to go in and change the volume, change the inflections, change the frequency. There's all kinds of things you can do in post that if you want to, you can, how do I say it, mold the performance of the actor, which the actor might not like so much. And now you talk about awards and Academy Awards, all that sort of stuff. I always wonder how many of these performances are rock solid and how many of them are a little bit tweaked. You never know, but it's amazing what you do with technology, and that's just an example. And then also part of that scene, I had my drone out, and I went from them, and then I moved towards the other shot of him at the goalpost. And I mentioned this before in production, and it also works with editing. Obviously, when you're trying to color grade and you're trying to match shots, I wanted to be shooting raw with my drone because I'm shooting raw with my red Komodo. And I think if I was using one of my drones that was just the 422 10-bit, blah, blah, whatever, that shot wouldn't have looked right. It wouldn't have matched right. It's one thing if you're using a drone for an establishing shot, which I had for this movie, and I actually had for this location, I had an establishing shot. If you're doing that, people, okay, it's a drone, it's whatever, and it looks different. But when you're doing something like I did there, that's an example of it really needs to kind of match as best as you can because it's just not going to look right. And I think it matched really well. Now let's talk about the logistics, or from a system perspective and from an editing perspective, how I did things. I have a pretty good editing system. I can edit 8K raw, red raw on my system, and so I was shoot. I had backups of all the footage. I believe I had about 5 terabytes of footage for this movie, and I had them on two normal hard drives, and then I also had a 4 terabyte SSD drive to do my editing on, if you will, right? And some other things that I did is I went in, and like I said, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty details on how to do this, but with Red Raw, you can go into, what's it called? Cine X Pro, is it called? The Red program that they have. You can go in there, actually, you go into Resolve first, and you can cut the scenes, or actually, I should say, trim all of the footage to the shots that you want. And then you can go into Red Cine Pro, I believe it's called Cine Pro X or Cine X, and you can go in there and have it um, redo the footage. What was it? The codec, it redoes it. So for example, if you've got a 10-second shot and you only need 5, it will redo it to 5 seconds and output that file, and it'll only be 5 seconds long, and it'll still be red raw. Okay, you with me? So you can't do that inside of Resolve itself. So in Resolve, I would create the edit, if you will, and I had the EDL done, and then I went into Cine. Well, there's some guys over here yelling. I don't know if you can hear them or not. I'm at the football field. So I did that to consolidate, if you will, or to trim a lot of the footage. So if I had, let's just say I had 7 terabytes of footage, by doing that, I could get it down to much less. But I ended up having, like I said, around 5, and then I took it down to, I don't know what I was in the 3 to 4 range. I think it was the 3 range terabytes. And then I had, some wiggle room for that 4 terabyte SSD. So anyway, that's what I did from a first logistics perspective. Now, from editing, I also edited the movie in 20-minute chunks. And I did that because I just didn't want to have this big old long, hour and a half, 2 hour. The movie actually ended up being close to 2 hours. The director's cut, if you will. On Amazon, I have the edited version, cut down version, but I won't get into that. And so then I did it in 20-minute chunks because, it just was more manageable. So that's how I did that. And I also did those 20-minute chunks in my Digital Performer audio, because it was just easier, once again, to do the different soundtrack stuff in the 20-minute chunks. Now, from special effects, if you will, or anything like that, I didn't have any. I was really careful when I shot it. Once again, I said in production that it was simple. It was what I can do, not what I want to do. So I shot it in a way that I wasn't going to have to be pulling out any signs, how you're worried about copyright issues and stuff like that. I was just really careful when I shot it so that I wouldn't have to worry about that stuff in post. So I'm trying to think, I can't think of anything I had to do from a special effects perspective to remove anything. And so it is what it is. So as far as the color grading is concerned, I don't know how much you guys know about Resolve, but in Resolve, you can have you can save a still as a grade, right? And I kind of came up with a look that I wanted, if you will, and I won't get into what that is, but I came up with a look that I wanted for everything, and I had that grade still saved, and so it was just a matter of copying it over, for every single scene, if you will, and I tweaked it a little bit if I needed to, but it really wasn't that complicated, and I intended it to not be complicated. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the audio. Like I said, I have these plugins that I can use inside of Resolve, but then I also have the others. For the most part, I just use the Dialogue Isolate, and I believe it was Nectar 3 at the time, to sweeten the audio a little bit. And that's pretty much all I did. There might have been some examples where I went into RX10 and did a leveler, if you will, where it goes in and it levels all the audio, which I use fairly often for different types of projects, but I'm not going to get into that for this one. But for the most part, like I said, I did the Dialogue Isolate, I did Nectar 3, and that's how I cleaned up my audio. And it does a pretty good job. Now, DaVinci Resolve now has their AI audio stuff, so it's pretty good too. It's certainly usable, and I use that phrase good enough. I think it falls into that category, but that's not how I did this movie. Now, from the soundtrack perspective, I have a lot of Native Instruments sounds. I mean, a bunch. And so I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to get into all of the nitty gritty, stuff about the software. but I've got a lot of native instruments. I've got some other ones as well. The names have escaped me right now, the brands, but a bunch. And so if you get a chance to watch Walk in the Park, like I said, I did the entire soundtrack. I didn't get any music from any outside source in the sense of what are one of those. I'm not going to name some of them, but you guys know what I'm talking about. There's some out there that you can get it, and I'm not going to get into the problems that come with those. I'm not going to get into that. But I did the entire soundtrack with all the instruments that I have on my computer, blah 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 blah, and once again using that tune track. And I have a Native Instruments keyboard. I have also a product by I believe it's Native Instruments, isn't it, called Machine? If you guys don't know what that is, it's spelled Mashine, I think it is. No, I'll spell it for you guys here. That thing is great for, I'm not going to get into, like I said, I'm not going to dive too deep, but I was able to use that to just kind of create a certain sound or a feel or something like that. And then I would take it in and tweak it with inside of on the computer. I should say I have the Machine version where it's the little square thing. Like I said, I'll show you the picture of it. But you also can do it in a computer. So anyway, I used that. I used my Native Instruments keyboard, which gives you a lot of flexibility. I'm not going to, like I said, dive deep into that stuff. But that's pretty much how I did the entire soundtrack. I used a tune track. I used Digital Performer. I have Cubase now, but Digital Performer is still good in its own way. I used Digital Performer. I used all my Native Instruments plugins, and there's some others, and then my Native Instruments keyboard. And I probably spent, boy, because I'm certainly no expert musician, if you will. There are guys that maybe can do it in less time, I don't know. But I spent probably 6 weeks, a month to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks on just the soundtrack for Walk in the Park. Okay, so now let's talk about deliverables. This is more of a distribution thing, and I may talk about it a little bit there, but I mastered everything with 12-bit. There is a 12-bit option out of Resolve, and that's what I mastered everything. I mastered it at 4K DCI, shot it all 24p on the, not 2398, 24p. And then the deliverables to Amazon, like I said, I'll probably talk about this in distribution, but the deliverables were, I believe it was just H.265 main 10. So it's the H.265 10-bit. I believe that's what went to Amazon, but I wanted to have the masters in that 12-bit, and of course they're giant files, but they're mastered in 12-bit. And then I had multiple audio channels. I won't get into it a lot. There was the different channels. One's for dialogue, one was for music, one was for special effects and stuff like that, because you want to break those things up in case you need to, break them up in the future. Okay, so now let's talk about what I might do differently next time. I know this series is about how I made Walk in the Park, I hope I've given you at least something to think about. Like I said, I'm not getting into the buttons you press and stuff like that. But now let's talk about for the next projects that I'm working on. AI is crazy, you guys. Am I going to want to be able to do my own stuff for the music? Yeah, it's possible. Production, I don't think is going to change a whole lot, because there's some AI things that you can do. You can throw in a photo and you want somebody blowing up, or car crashing or something like that. I don't really do that kind of stuff. I'm not saying I mean not ever or whatever, but I think there's a place for that. But AI, at least what I've seen, it's still low resolution. It certainly isn't 4K, but I know there's a lot of advancements on making 2K into 4K and all that sort of stuff, and I think that AI is doing a lot of that. They're doing the AI stuff at 720p, and then they're up-resing it to 4K, but I'm not going to get into that. But from an audio perspective, with the software that's out, you can really, it's going to change things for me. Now, I'll tell you where it's not going to change things, and that is I'm probably not going to go in and say, oh yeah, I just need a Western, or I just need a classic this or whatever. I may do that to a certain degree from a style. But what you can do with AI, which is really good, is you can do just like a rudimentary. You can kind of do a bass line, maybe a drum track, maybe, of course, even a melody. And that's something else that I'm not going to dive into here, but I will tell you this. I did have a melody theme, if you will, for Walk in the Park. I didn't use it throughout, because what I did with Walk in the Park, for this, I should let you know this, I wanted each character or each conversation to kind of have their own theme song. And so some only had one conversation, but for the ones that had multiple conversations, I tried to use their same theme music, if you will, for while they were talking. That was another thing. But for the AI stuff, I could see myself, kind of having a theme song, or having, some anyways, some music that I've created and then create a bunch of different versions of that music for a movie. And then of course I would stem it out so that I've got the bass and the drums and all that sort of stuff. And then if I have to, you know, to control, the fade outs, if you will, or ends and the beginnings and, whatnot, I may do that on my own, but AI is going to make a huge difference for what I might do in the future. Now, I also want to throw in something else for you musicians out there, and this is tough, and I don't want to get into too much of this because we don't have time for this. It's a whole other conversation. If I had the money, I would be using musicians. Absolutely. I would not be doing the situation where, oh, I have the money, I'm just going to put more money in my pocket. If I had serious money to make a movie, I would be using musicians. I would have a guy that's, doing the soundtrack. And this is the other thing that's funny too, because for a very long time, drummers, violinists, those sort of people, they haven't been working because all these soundtrack guys are doing it on their computers. Like I said before, Native Instruments has got a ton of instruments, and there's other companies out there. Those guys, you don't have to call it AI if you don't want to call it AI, but they haven't been working. And they haven't been working because you have all these sampled instruments now on keyboards. And so now it's gone to the next level, which is AI has it's all ones and zeros, you know what I'm saying? It's all digital and it can create just about anything. So now not only the drummers and the violinists and all those people who have been not working for a decade or more, now it's the entire, now it's the guy sitting with the keyboard that has all the instruments is worried about his job because now AI can do it all. So it's an interesting world that we live in right now because it's just a progression. There's a saying that I like to say is everybody likes AI until it's their job, right? And it's been going on for a long time. Computers have been changing things for a very long time, all the way back from film. Kodak is not the company it used to be. Kodak was a big deal, right? Now it's, okay, what? It's all ones and zeros, right? It's Sony, it's Red, it's what? Okay, Arri. But Arri, anyway, I'm not going to dive into that. Watch my Film Look series if you want to see that. So AI is absolutely going to be a tool for the future. But if I had the money, and I'll say it again, if I had the money, I'd be hiring real people because it's a craft, and I want people to be able to master their craft. I just do. Okay, just one last thing before we go. It's funny, I'm out here. I don't know if you heard them. There's these guys that are practicing football. I don't know if it's a guy with his sons or what, but they're practicing football stuff here. And he said something that I thought was great. It was so appropriate because we're talking about athletics right now, okay? He said, don't settle with good enough or something along those lines. He goes, it's never be good enough, never good enough, never good enough. And I love that. Let me tell you why I loved it. Because in our business, you absolutely positively have to pursue excellence. Absolutely. And hopefully you get to a point where you can, you have the money to do what you want to do, right? We've talked about this. But the reality of this business is, and unlike sports, okay, in sports, you have the opportunity to be the best you can. If you're out running on a marathon or whatever you're doing, it's not about how much money you have. It's about being the best that you possibly can be. But in this business, there are times that you may have to settle with good enough because there's a whole lot of people out there watching movies and TV shows and various other things that are good enough. There's a whole lot of that going on right now. And so in this business, you want to be very good at what you do. You want to pursue excellence, but you better have a really good understanding of what you want to do versus what you can do, because sometimes good enough may mean you making a living at it or not. So that's where I'm going to sum this thing up. Hope you enjoyed this. Like I said before, be sure and put any questions that you have. I'll try and answer them. The next episode is going to be on distribution, and that's going to be a fun one because for me, that's kind of a unique situation, but there's some similarities that you'll all have to go through. So thumbs up or thumbs down. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.